You down to make more of that tea tomorrow?
Of course. What else would I be doing,
That lemon juice really makes a difference.
It's quicker. It also has a bit of a kick to it as well,
It's true. Also depends on how much you add.
This is true.
Let me ask you a question.
Oh, I love me a good question.
This one's juicy. Who's more dominant, Tom Brady or Wayne Gretzky?
Who's more dominant? Well, I think you know my answer, and I think I know yours. So, 1, 2, 3.
Tom Brady.
Wayne. Yeah. See, I mean, we can go back and forth on that all day.
We really could. I always love me a good rumble.
That would be pretty. I'm just thinking how crazy it would be to meet one of them one day.
Yeah, it really would be crazy. Be nuts. No pun intended.
It would be cooler than anything. No pun intended.
It'd be kind of wild if they decided to turn up. No pun intended.
We should go with them to the Amazon River. No pun intended.
That sounds like fun. We just gotta make sure we don't get caught in the river and flop like fish. No pun intended.
We got to make sure and check that we're okay. No pun intended.
You're right. We wouldn't want to fold under pressure. No pun intended.
Did I tell you tomorrow? I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna buy myself a couple of slick suits. No pun intended.
I don't think you did, but that'll look really clean. And I don't know if I told you this, but I'm gonna be going on some trips out of the country. No pun intended.
It's cool. Just when you get there, make sure that you give me a call. No pun intended.
Oh, well, I wouldn't want to raise any concerns.
When you're making decisions down there, you must be all in on them. No pun intended.
Right, yeah, and you can always bet that it'll be a good time. No pun intended.
And when you get back from your trip, let's go on your boat. No pun intended.
Yeah, that'd be a good time. I just got to make sure we have the towels so that we're set. No pun intended.
And hopefully we don't get flushed away by sea. I hope. No pun intended.
Yeah, at that point we'd probably impair ourselves. No pun intended.
And I would probably end up pulling a quad. No pun intended.
Yeah, and then you'd have to straddle to walk. No pun intended.
And at that point, the button on my pants will probably burst off.
Yeah, and that could cause someone to go blind. No pun intended.
A little advice: if you're ever caught in a long line, just shove your way to the front. No pun intended.
That's really good advice. I just gotta make sure I don't get anyone too mad and get caught under the gun. No pun intended.
If you have, on the opposite end of that, I would love to go on an old-fashioned trip with some old-fashioned cowboys. No pun intended.
That'd be really fun. We just gotta make sure we bring our ladies. No pun intended.
And if you have the time and money, I suggest you invest in some rockets. No pun intended.
That's probably pretty smart. We just gotta make sure during takeoff that nothing falls out of our pockets. No pun intended.
Although if that were to happen, I bet Houston would be able to tell everything that is going on up there.
They probably would. And I don't know if I told you this, but when you move to San Francisco next month, I want you to make sure you make a splash in the bay. No pun intended.
No, it's my only option. I'll make sure to keep those dealers off the streets. No pun intended.
Yeah, you got to keep those hands off the streets. No pun intended.
By the way, tonight when we go to sleep, we must sleep in the dark. No pun intended.
I agree 100%. We can't let any range of light in. No pun intended.
In the morning, we'll wake up, we'll make pancakes, but we got to be deep stacked on them. No pun intended.
Definitely. And you never want to be short stacked when making pancakes. No pun intended.
And we both know, but it's always right to have good etiquette when eating. No pun intended.
You're right, and that's very applicable, because I was at a very nice dinner last week in Hollywood. No pun intended.
Cool. Oh, that's interesting. I was recently at a nice dinner in England with the royal family. No pun intended.
That's awesome. I bet you went straight for the lobster roll with a hint of mint and some lemon zest. No pun intended.
How'd you know that? No, it was cool. It was really, it was a good dinner. They were really generous. I could really feel all of their hearts. No pun intended.
I bet you could. And while you're there, you should have Queen Elizabeth take you to some clubs. No pun intended.
True. I would say Queen Elizabeth should buy you a diamond necklace. No pun intended.
That'd be pretty nice. You know, and what do you think though? What do you think? Do you think David Spade might show up? No pun intended.
I think so. What are the odds if we could get a picture with him? What do you think?
You know, I'd say they're pretty high. He might just have to shuffle his schedule around. No pun intended.
Yeah. All those guys are great. If we were ever on Jimmy Kimmel's show, we would really have to buy in to his jokes. No pun intended.
You're right. We'd have to be alert and keep our heads up. No pun intended.
And we couldn't stay out too late because we just don't want to do that. We would have to pay attention to the time. No pun intended.
You're right. We wouldn't want to get lost and maybe burn down a house. No pun intended.
We would be running hot from the cops at that point. No pun intended.
You know, and if that happened, we could go to Antarctica. You know, not many cops there. Just we'd be on a cold streak, though. No pun intended.
True. If we were there, though, we would have to, to survive, we would have to boil a full pot of water. No pun intended.
We really would. You know, I gotta stay warm. I don't know if I told you this, but if I was ever a NASCAR driver per se, I hope you know I'd be making those tight turns.
Oh,
no pun.
Of course, can't be making those loose turns.
Really can't. And by the way, if you're ever in Texas, make sure that you don't overcome your meat intake limit. No pun intended. No double pun intended.
That's a good point. But I would really want to go to Denver and meet Peyton Manning because I want to get a stack of his business cards and also to hear him yell Omaha. No double pun intended.
Sounds fun. And if you're ever in any mines down there, just be careful not to stub your toe on any wooden boards. No pun intended.
Yeah, I got to make sure there's room to run out. No pun intended.
You're right. And when the firefighters show up, make sure to show them your ID. No pun intended.
Yeah. And after all that, I hope we can still become leaders of the world, you know? No pun intended.
I really hope so too, and I hope that we'd be trusted to defend the universe. No pun intended.
And if we did meet some unreasonable aliens, hopefully we wouldn't become dominated by them. No pun intended.
I hope so too, and we really wouldn't want to flip out in that case. No pun intended.
If we did defeat them, though, we would surely become kings of the world. No pun intended.
We would, but we wouldn't act like traditional kings. We'd be acting like some jokers. No pun intended.
At least till age 52. No pun intended.
Definitely. And we'd have a prodigy 13-year-old playing us piano.
I would hope so. Maybe we can even go to the four corners with him. No pun intended.
Yeah, or you with him at 7-Eleven. No pun intended.
Or maybe go to a Five Guys with him. No pun intended.
Yeah, maybe play some billiards and hit the 8-ball in with him. No pun intended.
Or take a trip and go to a Six Flags. No pun intended.
That'd be really fun. And I don't know if I told you this yet, but what I really want for Christmas this year is some salt and vinegar chips. No pun intended.
I gotcha. That's funny you mentioned that. Last year for Christmas, I got what I got was an easel for painting, and I was just constantly drawing dead things on it. No pun intended.
I'd love to see some of those. And by the way, another thing I'd really love to do for Christmas is have a trip to the World Series of Poker. No pun intended.
Oh, that'd be fun. I can see you're big on Christmas. Do you just want to count the days until then? No pun intended.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. And I think while we count, we should watch the show called The Prophet. No pun intended.
If we did that, if we did all that, we would learn a lot of information. I bet. No pun intended.
That's true, and I think let's do it all.